This is PJNET.TV, and this is my perspective and comments. In this video segment of my perspective and comments, we cover politics, society here and abroad, and the events of the day that are shaping our nation. PJNET.TV, my perspective and comment, coming to you with a worldview, one nation under God. Welcome to my perspective and comments. And I guess we'll start out right now. A strike has been averted, maybe. And what am I talking about? Well, it's, we've seen on the news here this rail strike that was looming out there, and it just didn't creep up on us. It seems like it has, but they've been in these negotiations for almost 2 years now, and over the last several months, it's been the potential for a strike has been out there, and people have been talking about it. But again, what we seem to be seeing from this Biden administration is one, leading from behind, and always everything is a crisis. So what did we have here? We had the potential of the rail in the country being shut down, and you want to talk about severe problems in our supply chain. That would be one of them, especially when you think of 30% of all the gross product that's moving is coming via the freight, and the potential of $2 billion a day being lost because of the potential of this shutdown. Now, what we have here is we have 12 unions that make up the rail and all the transportation in the transportation area of the unloading and loading of the trains with the products. Now, though these 12 unions, it appears that 10 of those unions basically have come to an established agreement right now, tentatively. But we have 2 unions out there right now that really haven't stepped forward to in any agreement. But they have pushed it off now, so that there's some breathing room at the end of the month, I guess. Those 2 unions that are in question about signing on with this tentative agreement that the 10 unions came up with is out there. So the can's been kicked a little bit down the road, but at this point, we're not going to have a strike, which would, when we take a look at our inflation woes and the talk of recession, this would rapidly push us to that area if we were to have a nationwide strike like that with in the heart of our supply chain. I'd like to talk a bit about, Mike Lindell, the owner and CEO of MyPillow. He was in Minnesota going to a Hardee's restaurant to get some food, and he's surrounded by the FBI with I guess a subpoena in hand, and they want his cell phone. So we've been seeing this, people getting harassed and wrapped up with the FBI knocking at their door, or accosting them in the streets and wanting this, that, and the other. In this case, they wanted his phone, and it appears that, and if you don't know, Mike Lindell is a staunch supporter of President Trump, and it sure, I mean, what we're witnessing right now is, banana republic style activities here. When you have the DOJ weaponizing the FBI to go after political opponents, and that's what it is. You can't not see this. That anyone that supports Trump or has said things like in this case they were going after Mike Lindell, I guess, because he said some things regarding and had on his platform, Frank, in the podcast and website, talking and really looking in depth in these Dominion voting machines and the irregularities and the problems with those machines. And Mike Lindell has been very vocal regarding these machines and the potential that was there, outright seen, that fraud could have been in place there with those machines and the Dominion voting machines as being problematic. So supposedly that's what the warrant was looking at in that area. We'll see how that all plays out, but we are really seeing, and there's no way around it here, they are anyone that's politically a supporter of President Trump. We see the FBI moving in, and now you have Biden up there with these speeches, basically calling anyone that he's backed it up a bit, but that speech that we heard, that hate speech from Biden, was basically broad brushing anyone that supported President Trump or voted for President Trump was some kind of terrorist. So we've been seeing that rhetoric coming from the left, and I think more and more people are finding that that this is really beginning to get disgusting. And we're even seeing now, there was a poll out that was showing that a lot of Democrats and those moderates are saying this isn't right, and they're seeing it. So that's coming to light. But it's ironic. It's almost as if these institutions that have been corrupted from the left, like the FBI. I mean, here's supposed to be a department, a part of government that we're looking up to, that they're investigating crimes. But what we've been seeing over these last 5 years is that the FBI looks like they were dirty dealing and breaking the law. So a lot of things are coming out now, and we're seeing the DOJ weaponizing these agencies. I'd like to talk about what we've been seeing in the country, in the nation, that crime is going up, going sky high. Areas of murders and burglaries, every area of crime has been going sky high. We seeing, and again, you can point at these blue states. When we've talked about this before, like Chicago, like New York City. We're seeing Seattle, Portland, Philadelphia, and what we're seeing is a lot of this has to do with when you don't deal with criminals, and in fact, when you're letting criminals out and not holding them accountable when they break the law, there's a punishment that gets paid. That's not happening. As a matter of fact, in our area right now, in the Syracuse area, they've been having at one of our elite colleges, Syracuse University, they've been having burglaries. And it's up. It's out of control. Now here's an area, a college that parents are spending all kinds of money to send their children, their kids to this college, only to be hearing reports of burglaries sky high, and that. We're seeing more and more of that nationwide, and what we've been witnessing here is, as I've mentioned before, Soros bought and paid for DAs that aren't holding anyone accountable, and then you have people like Kathy Hochul, saying, yes, this bail reform we have, and cashless bail, and the revolving door of people coming in, committing a crime, going to the judge. The judge says, okay, you're out on bail within a matter of hours, and the crimes continue. And that's what we've been witnessing nationwide. And people are getting sick of it. And what I'd like us to take a look at now is we're going to have Tucker Carlson has a clip here that we'll be watching, and he discusses what's been taking place in our nation when it comes to crime and holding people accountable. And he also has an interview with Carrie Lake. She's running for governor there in Arizona, and she has some things to say about what we've been seeing at the southern border, and how she would correct things and bring some sanity back to what we've been seeing with illegal aliens invading our southern border. So here, take a look.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Imagine dystopia. You hear that word frequently. What does it mean? Picture it in your mind's eye. Dystopia is a world where the police will not protect you. They refuse. And at the same time, you are not allowed to protect yourself. So who does that leave in charge? Who runs a world like that? Well, young men with guns. They're in charge. The cruelest and most violent element of any society. The people with the least to lose. The shortest time horizons. The shallowest reservoirs of impulse control. People like that have all the power. You have no power. And that means that everything you have is theirs. That's the end of civilization. It exists in pockets around the world, Mogadishu famously. But if you think it's confined to Mogadishu, you haven't been to Chicago lately. This past Friday, just before noon, a 30-year-old man called Ryan King walked out of a gym in Chicago's Bucktown neighborhood. Bucktown is a former Polish enclave just west of Lincoln Park. That's one of the nicest parts of the city. Real estate websites describe Bucktown as young and hip, a place where recent college graduates who can pay above average rents might live. It's where your kids might live with their friends as they start their first jobs. And that's how most people think of Bucktown, people who haven't been there recently. But local news accounts suggest a very different reality. Shots fired during Bucktown robbery. Man shot during robbery attempt in Bucktown. Bucktown couple shares account of armed robbery, and so on and on. Many stories like this. Ryan King probably wasn't thinking of armed robbery as he walked out of the gym on Friday. It was broad daylight. It was a weekday. But then a car pulled up right next to him. 3 young men jumped out and stuck a gun in his face. Here's an account from a local Fox station in Chicago.
Ryan King turned into an alley near the corner of Wabansia and Oakley to get back to his mother's apartment when a dark colored vehicle pulls up and 3 young men jump out. King says one of them pointed a gun right in his face, demanding his wallet. And moments later, he says a passerby saw the mugging unfolding and yelled. Instincts and his martial arts training kicked in, and that's when King hit one of the men with an elbow and ran off.
Again, broad daylight, middle of the day, nice neighborhood in one of America's biggest cities. So what happened next? Well, according to reporting by CWB Chicago, just minutes after Ryan King was threatened with death for daring to walk outside in his own neighborhood, Chicago police spotted the gunman's vehicle. But there was nothing they could do about it. Their supervisor ordered them not to pursue it. So the criminals just drove off. And of course, they committed more violent crimes. In the hours after Ryan King was attacked, 16 more armed robberies were reported in the area. Police believe at least 2 organized armed gangs are now operating with impunity around Bucktown, which means the gangs are in charge now. That's what the collapse of civilization looks like. But it's now normal in Chicago. According to data from the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper, last year, police made arrests in just 12% of reported crimes. That's the lowest level recorded in Chicago history. And that's what it means when politicians hand control of a city to criminals. Here, you run it. In Chicago right now, taxpayers are more likely to be the victims of crime than criminals are to be punished for it. So the question is, why would anyone in Chicago pay taxes? You'd have to be a masochist to do that, and pretty soon only the masochists will be. So how did this happen? Well, it's no mystery. There are many threads, but George Soros is a big one. Soros paid for this to happen. Soros backed a prosecutor called Kim Foxx, who turned Chicago over to the most vicious people who live there. Not the decent, good people in all neighborhoods, the most vicious, antisocial people, the ones who truly don't care about others, who are willing to kill people for their shoes or their car. The worst people. And they run things now. This is from our Fox station in Chicago.
Clutching pictures of loved ones, families come together to share their loss.
My sister's name is Tiara Taylor. She died at 30 years old by the hands of her husband.
It's been 336 days since the murder of my son that was 4 years old.
They're also united in their anger and frustration that the killers of their family members walk free. They largely blame the office of the Cook County State's Attorney and Kim Foxx.
So we ask you, Kim Foxx, how much longer do our families need to suffer in pain and sorrow with no justice for our loved ones being served?
Our children's blood on your hands, Miss Foxx, and I hope you see their faces every night.
You think Kim Foxx cares? You think she's watching? You think those scenes like that penetrate at all the shell of self-esteem that surrounds her? No, of course not. She doesn't care at all. That's why she did it in the first place. Someone should take action immediately on that. But she's not the only person who did this. The federal government also played a role, and you probably didn't know it was happening. Over the 8 years of the Barack Obama administration, the Department of Justice forced more than a dozen police departments around the country to enter into something called dissent decrees. Chicago was one of them. The Obama administration began an investigation into the Chicago Police Department, and they got a consent decree. Now, all of these decrees took the same form. They pronounced police departments guilty of racism if those departments disproportionately interact with African Americans, regardless of whether those interactions were legally justified. In other words, the law is entirely irrelevant to the consent decree, and so is reality itself. Here's a line from the DOJ dissent decree imposed under Obama against Chicago. Quote, raw statistics show that CPD, Chicago Police Department, uses force almost 10 times more often against blacks than against whites. Okay, that's one data point. It's not the whole story. It doesn't begin to tell the whole story. There was no analysis whatsoever about whether the use of force in these specific cases was justified. None. So this is not science. They may have graphs. It's not science. It's some kind of crazed race ideology. It's the equity agenda. And in effect, and this of course was the intended effect, these consent decrees have been a disaster for the people of these cities. Even in New Orleans, whose mayor, as we've told you many times, has driven that city, that beautiful city, which is worth saving, right into the sewer. Even the Democratic mayor of New Orleans said recently, and we're quoting, the consent decrees handcuff our officers. That's an understatement. At this point, New Orleans is essentially out of police officers. The median police response time in New Orleans to 911 calls is over 2 hours. Imagine, armed people in your home. You call the police. 2 hours. A lot can happen in 2 hours. That's the total collapse of civilization. There's no reason to have a government if the response time is 2 hours. Buy your own guns. Establish your own order. That's where we're going to be very soon. On a recent Friday night in that city, New Orleans, one third-year officer called Scott Fanning just quit mid-shift. Here's how he described it. Quote, that night I quit. There were over 40 calls holding when I logged into my computer. But there were only 35 patrol officers logged in for all 8 districts in the city. Some nights there has literally been one person in a big, dangerous city. But it's not just New Orleans. All over the country, police officers are quitting, and they are not being replaced.
Departments across the country say a lack of officers is severely limiting what they can respond to.
We'll routinely respond to shootings, but if the person is going to survive, we are not going to follow up on that.
In Philadelphia, the department says it's short more than 500 officers from before the pandemic. Los Angeles also missing nearly 700 officers from its ranks, prompting the cancellation of its animal cruelty unit and forcing officials to shrink the size of its human trafficking, drug and gun units, and more. With officers struggling to respond to just serious felonies, communities are noticing an uptick in misdemeanors, like in Philly, where more than 30,000 abandoned car complaints are going unanswered.
Oh, did you hear that? So the forces of compassion, of caring, the people who have much more evolved consciences than you do, the people who put coexist in bumper stickers on their Subarus, those people defunded the animal cruelty unit in Los Angeles. So dogs can get tortured to death and nobody cares. And people too. And the cops who remain on those forces, by and large, don't want to work there because who would want to work there for any amount of money? Terrorizing the police with threats of prosecution if they do their jobs. That's what the Democratic Party has done, and the effect has been what it was intended to be. Depopulating police departments. Crime surged. So in the end, they didn't tell you this, but they succeeded in getting rid of the police. And now politicians are just admitting it out loud in a lot of places. They've decided to just legalize crime. Here's the mayor of Orland Park, Illinois, Keith Pekow, describing the state's new Safety Act. Watch this.
As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners. Officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses.
So how is this working exactly? Is it such a low-T country that no one's going to do anything about this? Politicians in Illinois just legalized violence. I sure appreciate your coming on. So you've made, I think, the clearest, leaving aside whatever anyone thinks about the last election, you made the clearest defense of free speech that I have seen this year.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. We go back to this old document called the U.S. Constitution, and I spent 30 years, Tucker, as a journalist. So the First Amendment is pretty darn important, and they seem to be taking that away from us right now. But you've described basically the left's hypocrisy, and you've described that old saying, when they've lost the debate, they resort to slander, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, exactly, because I mean, I'm not in Arizona, but it's sort of been following your campaign. And I think you have really provocative and, in my view, true things to say about, for example, immigration. But those aren't covered because you're a big lie adherent. Do you believe the media uses that slur to make certain people won't hear what you're saying about the issues?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if they aren't bad-mouthing me and running hit pieces on me, then they will have to talk about the issues. And when you look at our policies, our America First, Arizona First policies, once they start covering that, it's game over. We win in a landslide, and then they're stuck with me for 8 years. And I think I'm a nightmare for the liberal media in Arizona.
So your opponent, and this may have changed by airtime tonight, but last I checked, your opponent was refusing to debate you, citing NBC News and CNN, saying she's crazy. Can she get away with that?
Well, she seems to be getting away with it. I mean, she's getting raked over the coals, even by the mainstream media. But it tells you how little her staff and her supporters think about her. They would rather her get just trashed right now in the media than show up for a debate, because they know that she has no policy to stand on. She's got a terrible back. I mean, if you look back at when she was a legislator, she voted against a border wall. She voted against a virtual border wall. She voted against funding border security. But yet she did write legislation to make sure we start teaching sex education in kindergarten. Her priorities are whacked, And the people of Arizona are really turned off by the fact that she won't show up for a debate. It's a job interview. The people of Arizona are the hiring manager, and we're showing up for a job interview. You don't get the job if you don't show up for the interview. But she knows that she will get roasted on stage because of her background.
I can see why they're trying to silence you. Since you're here, I just have to throw this at you, and because you live in a border state that has borne the brunt of the lawlessness on our border. We've just received digital footage of illegal aliens being dropped off in Martha's Vineyard. Apparently, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, flew them there on the idea that communities, border towns in Texas and Arizona are bearing all the brunt, and maybe the people who make these policies should have to live with them. What's your view of this?
You know, I get a kick out of it watching these liberal mayors just, throw their hands up and say we can't handle it because it's life every day for us in these border states. However, I'm not a fan of it, Tucker. I mean, we're just taking people here illegally who shouldn't be here. We're moving them further inland. My plan is the most bold, aggressive plan on the border. We're going to secure the border. We're going to call it what it is, issue a declaration of invasion on day one, get troops on the border in the form of our National Guard. We're going to stop people from coming over, and we're going to stop the cartels from having control of our border. I don't like it as a mother, and I know no Arizonan likes it, that we are the pipeline for the most dangerous, deadly drug this country's ever seen, called fentanyl. #1 killer of young people. It's all coming through Arizona because Joe Biden gave control of our border to the cartels. And on day one, we're going to invoke our Article 1, Section 10 authority and take back control of our border away from the federal government. It's a dereliction of duty what they've done.
Yes.
And we're not going to let Joe Biden drag the state of Arizona down while he's trying to destroy this country.
Amen. Boy, I can see why they're trying to stop you. Carrie Lake, grateful that you came by tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.